Hello! Shoyan here. I'm a Japanese carpenter. Last time, I installed the joists. I'm going to install the floorboards this time. First, measure and mark the joint position on the end of the flooring material before installing it. These boards are basically 2 can. Therefore, shift the boards 1 can at a time and install them using the Ranko-Bari method. Even the dimensions are not the same. You can find the center of the joist and match the lengths. Measure and mark the position of the joint on the floorboard side as well. To determine the joint's position on the side, divide the width of the entire house by the width of the board and make sure that it doesn't become narrow at one end. There is a round pillar in the middle of this site. I'll also measure and mark from the joint. On one side of the room, there is a sliding glass door with an angle, so I'll start installing from the side. As I have a hard time remembering things, I'll be sure to write down the actual dimensions. Now, cut the floorboards. The floorboard is Japanese Cypress. It measures 30mm thick, 105mm wide, and 2 can long. Each color is different, so I will find a match for each board to make it as close as possible. When you cut the joint, you'll need to leave a little bit of clearance on the backside. It means cutting at a slight angle. This angle will help the top side to install tighter. Instead of cutting each board and installing it one at a time, I'll temporarily lay out half the room. That way, I can see the color and grain balance of the entire room, not just the spacing of the joints. Truthfully, it's hard to work temporarily laying out the boards. Stack the temporarily arranged boards in order. With this number of temporary arrangements, it takes 3 hours. Now, install the boards. Measure the first board's front side. I measure the board's width by checking it in several places with a string to avoid overlapping. Then, calculating backward from the first board's dimensions, I'll measure the board's width to the bottom angle of the sash. I'm using the Cypress material, Joko Muji. They're great. If the wood is full of knots, it's called Ito. The next grade is called Joko, which has fewer knots or curves in the grain. And the top grade is called Muji, a beautiful board without knots. Joko Muji is a board with a mixture of Joko and Muji. I'll install the boards, hiding as many of the knots as possible, and try to make Joko looks like Muji. Secure it in place with non-toxic glue and 65mm screws. The glue bottle is refillable, so I can squeeze it out and use it until the end. There are many pros and cons to the glue, but it will stick well depending on how you use it. Now, install the floorboards from the bottom of the sash angle. The angle part of the sash can easily shift. As the sash shifts, the first floorboard will shift. As a result, the entire flooring can move. Make sure to thoroughly check the length of the floorboard as you carefully install the first floorboard. Install the second floorboard. After jointing the first and second floorboards, check the entire length of the floorboard again. The first floorboard is the most important when installing. If the floorboard is not straight, the joint will not match the floorboard's right angle. Even if it appears straight, it can gradually move. If it's moving when you start, it won't fit at the end. But the good thing about solid boards is that they can be adjusted even if they shift in the middle of the board. It's just a matter of cutting off the protruding parts little by little. Now that I've installed some flooring, I'll move the cutting area. To install a new floor section, I have to move to another place in the middle. Process the log pillar in the center of the room. I'll chisel off the bottom so that the floor can fit in. It's called kubikiri. In Japanese, it's the same as restructuring. If the pillar is round, I can trace and chisel it neatly. If I chisel off the part, gaps will not appear even when the pillar dries out and shrinks. For that reason, I'll chisel 15 to 20 millimeters into the pillar and insert the floorboard. That is called kubikiri. No matter how often I do kubikiri, it's always a difficult job, especially with the stance involved. I can still work between the joists to lower my hands and eyes. If the plywood panels for the base had been in place, this would be much more difficult. It looks easy, but it's a tricky job. I may appear to be cutting off a lot, but this pillar isn't holding much weight. The design of the house is for the structure to remain strong without it, so there's no problem. I was able to position the joint of the board at the core of the pillar as planned. Therefore, I don't have to do any troublesome yariokuri. Insert the board firmly until it sits tight. Insert the board properly to fill the kubikiri area that is chiseled. I managed to make it beautiful. It looks like a cedar log has grown out of a cypress board. Do the kubikiri on the thick pillar as well. The design is for the thick pillar to look like a central pillar. It doesn't penetrate to the second floor, but it deserves to be a splendid central pillar on the first floor. This floorboard's joint section also fits the core of the pillar. As before, I can install the floorboards from both sides. Since one of the floorboards will be at the end, I cut off and angled the floorboard to install it easily. The pillar could be damaged when installing the floorboard from the side. Use a piece of wood positioned above to hold and guide the floorboard when installing it from the side. The board in front of the entrance stile is short. I shaved down the edges of the wood one by one and installed them. This set comes equipped with a wood stove. I used a curing board to make a paper pattern for the stile where I will lay the tiles. Use the paper pattern to outline the protruding floor, then cut it out with a circular saw. The three sections will cut easily, but the corner part is more difficult to cut with a circular saw. To remove the end tooth of the dead saw using tin scissors. If you do it this way, you can cut corners easily. Some joists are low and some are high, so cut out the parts that you don't need. Then chisel off the top edge of the protruding higher joists to match the lower. If I cut them out, I'll need to install more supports and sleepers. For that reason, I chiseled off the top edge to make the joists the same thickness. It's much stronger this way. Install the plywood panel as a foundation for the wood stove floor. I don't want to use a plywood panel, but according to the fire service law for wood stoves, the floor should be covered with a 12mm plywood panel, 12mm calcium silicate board, and tiles. Therefore, I have no choice but to use a plywood panel in such cases. I'll install the stile of the wood stove after the plywood panel is in place. I can't bear from the side of the stile after installing the calcium silicate board. I also used Japanese Cypress for the stile. The top side will be straight green. I was able to make all the pieces with 1 4-meter lumber. In their cut order, connect the pieces starting from the corner. Make sure that the straight and cross grain are aligned. The corner's 45 degrees milter joint is a bit tricky, but nowadays I use a sliding milter saw to cut it, so it fits at once if I set the angle correctly. Glue the stile firmly and screw it at small intervals. Lastly, plane the style to level it and correct any misalignment. The style is now in place. After this, I installed a double layer of calcium silicate board. I've been installing the floor for 3 days. This board is a mixture of Muji and Joko, but I managed to install the main floor without knots. To see Japanese cypress without knots is very beautiful. I'll keep working hard to install the rest. That's all for today. Thanks for watching.